So we'll get this landscape started with a full wash going all the way down the page, and I'm on about a 30-degree angle, so gravity will help pull this down. And I'm just mixing in a bit of yellow into my purple to sort of gray it a little bit. Add a touch more blue so it'll be a little more on the gray side, and then just a ton of water. So I'll get this color going, and I'm just going to keep pumping it with more and more water because this is just a base layer to sort of stain the page and get everything wet. So the more of an angle you pull it down from, the faster it will flow. And then just allow it to get a little bit more color as it gets closer down here in the foreground. And that will automatically give it a little bit of a sense of distance. So just let that soak in for a minute. And while it's still moist, I'm going to put the distant, far away mountain range. Now I'm going to put in some clouds before it dries all the way, and I'm still mixing up kind of a purple gray and getting my brush a little bit messy, and I'm just going to scrub these clouds on with this messy brush. So let's put this under layer of the land on, and I've got my yellow. I mixed it with a little bit of the mud in my tray. And this is my Sennelier Yellow Deep, so it will be nice and warm under layer. And I'm just going to carve around the sides of the river here. And kind of let the paint run out of the brush as I get close to that rock area. Give some dry brush scrapes. So next I'm going to put in that really dark purple mountain in the background. And I'll just pull this layer across the side of my brush, and I want it to break up a little bit. And I'm adding more blue to make that purple darker. And a touch of the gold. I'm not really getting this in one move, but that's okay. Touch it up after. So I wanted a little more broken up on the top, so I got rid of the water in my brush and just scraped across a little bit of paint there. So here I've got some quinacridone gold mixed with the purple, and I'm dry brush scraping that across. Those little broken up patches will give the illusion of detail for me. And I'll keep that foreground area clear over on the right side. And I'm going to add in some more purple here in the foreground. So now I'm going to come back and touch up this other foreground area on the right side, and I'm scraping in some more yellow just to pump that color a bit more. Got too dulled down, and then I will slash across it with some gold and then a little bit of purple on top of that. So now I'm just mixing a dark grayish mix for these background trees. And I kind of just polka dot them in and have some sort of in clusters, not all evenly spaced. But you still need some gaps where you can see into there. And then for perspective, they get a little bigger as they get closer. And then those are supposed to be cast shadows. I'll go back and darken the trees later. There we go. So now I'm going to start pulling in this middle ground area, and these dark trees here come out from behind the brighter yellow foreground hill, so make it look like they're tucked in behind it. Add a little more purple down here by the water side. So I dashed in just a little bit of extra purples, and then I'm going to put in some of these bushes and do some scrapes so that the scrape creates like a white trunk in the center area. And I have just a sharp end on the back of that brush that I can scrape with, but you can use a fingernail or credit card too. And then I'll just add some more dry brush scraping around the edges there and fluff up my trees. Here I just sort of build these guys up slowly. And I've got some raw sepia mixed with the gold for these ones. And then I will make them darker towards the center, a little bit lighter on the top. So now I'm just kind of using the very pointy tip of my brush and holding it from the end to flick in some loose little marks of some sort of branches and twigs hanging out. A couple of taller ones coming up over the horizon here. And now I'm going to put this water in, and so I'm just going to wet the whole area to start with. And for the back area on the left, I got sort of some warm purples, kind of reflecting the colors of the grasses over there. And here, where the rocks are going to come down, I've got some nice purples. And I'm going to throw in some extra darks where the rocks are. And here we got some of the yellow grasses being reflected in the water. And I just let all these colors melt down into one another. And now I'm going to throw in some raw sepia. And then get really dark as you get here towards you. And on the opposite side, I'm going to have heavier on the purple. You know, it's got that yin and yang thing going on here. So this purple balances that yellow. And it also creates that beautiful beam of light that goes through the water there. So I just move across it and blend it a bit and try to not touch it too much. And I want just a little bit more blue in my purple down here in the foreground area. Get it a bit darker. So now I've got the Loose Goose Scraggle brush, and I am doing some squiggle marks for this rocky area next to the water. And now I'll just scrape on some of the little shrubberies and plants that are on the side of the waterbed here. So I'm just making a couple little touch-ups and trying to not overdo it. It's always so easy to overdo it. And now we can fill in all the little shrubberies on the other side. And now I've got mostly just that raw sepia that I'm scraping on. And I'll give those a couple of little scrapes too. And so I'm going to add some little leaf shapes, and I'm going to use my messy brush. This one has shorter hairs, and when you swirl it around in the palm of your hand, the hair is split apart nicely, and so then I just dip that into my paint and scrape in these little leaf marks. It makes nice organic shapes that way. So for your brush to stay open and not all go back together into a point, it just needs to have most of the water sucked out of it, and then when it's a little bit dry, it'll stay separated for you. And now back to my long dagger brush to lightly pull in all these little twigs and branches here. And I'll flare out a few extra little twigs. Mine are a little bit thicker than I want them to be, unfortunately. My brush had a little too much water, but I'll just add a couple more leaves on top of there, and that will hide that. But before I put in those, I'm going to add this foreground tree trunk, and I've got white gouache. And I'm just going to paint right over the dark paint and let those two mix together a bit, and then add on some gold on top. And that tones that white down just a bit. Here are my little fixer leaves. And that's it.